The Galactic Council Chamber stretched across 3 kilometers of polished obsidian floors and crystalline walls that hummed with ancient energy. And within this vast space, representatives from over 200 species gathered to discuss matters of cosmic importance. Though on this particular day, the topic at hand seemed almost trivial to most of them, Ambassador Daniel Worth stood at the central podium, his human frame looking small against the towering displays that showed star maps and fleet movements. And he could feel the dismissive stares from dozens of alien delegates who viewed his species as little more than curious newcomers to the galactic stage, honored members of the council. Daniel began, his voice steady despite the weight pressing against his chest. I bring evidence of an imminent threat that endangers not only human territories, but the stability of the entire Outer Rim. He activated the holographic display, and a massive fleet of angular warships appeared above the assembly, their dark hulls bristling with weapons that could crack planets in half. The Gathari Empire has mobilized over 800 vessels near the Vilas Nebula, Daniel continued. Our intelligence confirms they intend to sweep through human space within the next 60 standard days. High Counselor Vethaner, a towering figure with luminescent skin and 4 eyes that never blinked, raised one elongated hand to silence the murmurs spreading through the chamber. Ambassador Worth. Vethaner spoke with a voice like grinding stones. The Gathari have threatened many species throughout their history, and yet the galaxy continues to turn. So what makes humanity believe they deserve special consideration? Daniel felt his jaw tighten but maintained his composure, knowing that showing anger would only confirm their assumptions about human primitiveness. We are not asking for special treatment, Daniel replied. We are asking for the mutual defense protocols that this council established 3,000 years ago. Protocols that exist precisely for situations like this. A clicking sound echoed from the Valorian section, where Commander Zirith sat with her armored carapace gleaming under the chamber lights, and she leaned forward with what might have been amusement in her compound eyes. The mutual defense protocols apply to full council members. Zirith stated flatly, humanity holds only observer status. Granted barely 40 years ago, so technically speaking, you have no standing to invoke those protections. Laughter rippled through several delegations, a sound that carried different tones from different species, but held the same meaning universally. And Daniel felt the isolation of his position like a physical weight from the Draven section. Delegate Morntai watched the proceedings with 3 of his 5 eyes, while the other 2 remained fixed on his personal data screen. And unlike his colleagues, he did not laugh, for he had studied human history and found things there that troubled him. Perhaps, another delegate called out. This one, a serpentine creature from the inner worlds. Perhaps humanity should simply negotiate with the Cathari, as other young species have done, for surrender often carries more favorable terms than resistance. Daniel turned to face the speaker directly, and something in his expression caused the serpentine delegate to pull back slightly. Surrender. Daniel repeated the word slowly, letting it hang in the recycled air of the chamber. You suggest we simply hand over our colonies, our resources, our people to an empire known for enslaving entire populations. High Counselor Vethaner waved dismissively with 2 of his 4 arms, clearly growing tired of this discussion. The Cathari are powerful but practical, Vethaner declared. They will take what they need and leave your species intact, more or less. And in a few centuries, you might even petition for observer status again. The casual cruelty of the statement struck Daniel like a physical blow, and he realized in that moment that these ancient species truly did not care whether humanity survived or perished. I see, Daniel said quietly. And then he did something that shocked the entire assembly. He smiled. Then I must inform this council of something important, Daniel continued, his voice carrying clearly through the sudden silence. Humanity did not come here to beg, and we did not come here hoping for rescue. We came here to offer you one final chance to stand with us. Confusion rippled through the delegations, for this was not how supplicants typically behaved, and several representatives exchanged uncertain glances. One final chance? Vethner repeated, his 4 eyes narrowing with what might have been the first hint of genuine attention. You speak as though you have alternatives. Daniel gathered his data tablets and stepped back from the podium, his movements unhurried and deliberate. Humanity learned something important during our short time among the stars. Daniel said, "We learned that waiting for others to save you is a luxury we cannot afford. And we learned that the galaxy respects only one thing." He paused at the chamber door, turning back to face the assembled representatives one last time. "Strength," he finished. "And you are about to discover just how strong humanity can be." The door sealed behind him, leaving 200 delegations in stunned silence. 12 hours later, aboard Earth's orbital defense station, Admiral Grace Holloway stood before a wall of tactical displays that showed the current position of every human vessel in the fleet. And beside her, Captain Nathan Cross waited for orders with the patience of a man who had long prepared for this moment. "The Council rejected our request," Grace said, though it was not truly a question. "Unanimously," Nathan confirmed. "Ambassador Worth is already en route back to Earth." Grace nodded slowly, her gray eyes reflecting the blue glow of the star maps. And she thought about all the years humanity had spent trying to prove themselves worthy of galactic respect. All the compromises and patience and quiet dignity in the face of condescension. "Activate protocol, First Thunder," Grace ordered, her voice carrying the weight of a decision that would change human history forever. Nathan's fingers moved across his console without hesitation, and throughout the fleet, encrypted orders began transmitting to every captain, every crew, every Marine waiting in their barracks. "Admiral," Nathan said as the status lights turned green one by one. "Are we really doing this? Are we really going to strike first?" Grace turned to face him, and in her expression he saw not doubt but absolute certainty. "The Cathari expect us to wait," she said. "They expect us to cower behind our defenses and hope for mercy, but that is not who we are. That has never been who we are." She looked back at the tactical display, where the first human vessels were already beginning to move toward their assigned coordinates. "Humanity does not wait to be conquered," Grace declared. "We write our own fate, and if the galaxy will not stand with us, then we will show them exactly what they have underestimated." Across human space, engines roared to life, and weapon systems hummed with deadly potential. And for the first time in galactic history, a species labeled as primitive and insignificant prepared to do what no one believed possible. They prepared to strike first, and the stars themselves seemed to hold their breath. The Velas Nebula burned with colors that no human eye had ever witnessed before this day. Swirling clouds of purple and gold that stretched across light years of empty space. And hidden within those beautiful clouds, the Cathari Armada waited like a coiled serpent preparing to strike Warlord. Thasek stood upon the command deck of his flagship, the Crushing Tide, and surveyed his assembled fleet with satisfaction. For 800 warships represented more firepower than most species would see in their entire history. And all of it was aimed at a single target. "Status report," Thasek commanded, his voice rumbling through the translation matrix that converted his guttural language into something his subordinates could understand. "All vessels report ready." "Warlord," his tactical officer responded. "We can begin the advance toward human space within the hour." Thasek allowed himself a moment of anticipation, for the humans had proven surprisingly resourceful in their brief time among the stars, and crushing them would bring great honor to his name and great wealth to his empire. He had no way of knowing that everything was about to change. 3 light years behind the Cathari fleet, in a region of space that every star chart marked as impassable. The first human vessels emerged from a jump point that should not have existed. The East Vigilant led the formation, her sleek hull designed for speed rather than brute force, and on her bridge, Captain Nathan Cross watched the sensor data with quiet intensity. Jump successful. Lieutenant Maya Torres reported from her communications station. All 32 vessels accounted for. Minimal drift from projected coordinates. Nathan allowed himself a small breath of relief. For the intelligence teams had spent years mapping these hidden routes through the nebula. And until this moment, no one had been certain they would actually work. Time to target? Nathan asked. 14 minutes at current speed, his navigation officer replied. The Cathari still have no idea we are here. Nathan opened a channel to the fleet, and his words carried to every ship in the formation. All vessels. This is Captain Cross, he announced. Remember your training and trust your instincts. We hit them hard, we hit them fast, and we do not give them time to recover. For Earth, for humanity. Across the fleet, men and women who had trained their entire careers for this moment prepared to make. History Admiral Grace Holloway monitored the operation from her command center aboard the orbital station, her eyes fixed on the real-time tactical feed that showed her ships as tiny blue dots approaching the massive red cluster of the enemy fleet. They are in position, Grace murmured, more to herself than to anyone else beside her. A young officer named Lieutenant Sandra Cole tracked the Cathari communications with growing excitement. Admiral, the enemy fleet is completely unaware, Sandra reported. Their patrol patterns show no deviation, no alerts, nothing. Grace nodded slowly, knowing that the next few minutes would determine whether humanity survived as a free species or became another footnote in galactic history. Execute Phase 1. She ordered in the Veles Nebula. Human ships opened fire. The first volley targeted not the Cathari warships themselves, but their supply vessels and communication relays, and within seconds, explosions bloomed across the enemy formation like flowers of destruction. Warlord Thasek stumbled as his flagship shook from a nearby detonation. An alarm screamed throughout the vessel as damage reports flooded every console. What is happening? Thasek roared, his forearms gripping the command rail as another explosion rocked the ship. We are under attack. Warlord, his tactical officer shouted back, panic evident in his voice. Unknown enemy vessels. They emerged from inside the nebula. Impossible, Thasek snarled. Nothing can navigate through those clouds. But the evidence burned before his eyes as another supply ship vanished in a ball of flame. And Thasek realized with growing horror that his fleet was suddenly vulnerable in ways he had never anticipated on the S Vigilant. Nathan Cross directed the attack with precision that bordered on artistic, his orders sending human ships weaving through the confused Cathari formation like wolves among scattered sheep. Target their command links, Nathan commanded. I want their ships isolated and unable to coordinate. Maya Torres worked her console with desperate speed, jamming enemy frequencies and intercepting their frantic attempts to organize a response. Captain, Maya called out. I am picking up Cathari transmissions. They are completely confused. Their tactical doctrine has no procedures for being attacked first. Nathan felt grim satisfaction at those words. For humanity had studied the Cathari for years and discovered their greatest weakness, an absolute certainty that they would always be the aggressors. Launch the boarding teams. Nathan ordered Sergeant Cody Barnes led his Marines through the breach in the Cathari carrier's hull, his boots clanging against alien metal as his squad fanned out behind him. And the enemy crew they encountered seemed almost paralyzed with shock. Move, 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 Cody shouted, directing his people toward the ship's data core with practiced efficiency. Cathari warriors they faced fought back with savage desperation. But human Marines had trained for close-quarters combat in ways that alien species often neglected, and within minutes, Cody's team had secured the critical intelligence they needed. Package secured, Cody reported through his helmet com. Returning to extraction point, back in the void, the battle reached its crescendo as human ships completed their attack runs and began withdrawing toward the jump points, leaving behind a Cathari fleet that burned and bled among the beautiful clouds of the Nebula Warlord. Thasek stood amid the wreckage of his command deck, his eyes fixed on the damage assessments that scrolled across his surviving displays. And what he saw there made his blood run cold. 60% of his supply vessels destroyed or disabled, 40% of his communication network eliminated, and over 200 warships damaged beyond immediate repair. How? Thasek whispered, the word carrying more confusion than anger. How did they know where to strike? How did they move so fast? His tactical officer had no answers. For nothing in Cathari history prepared them for an enemy who refused to wait for death. Warlord, the officer finally managed. Our invasion timeline is no longer viable. We must withdraw and regroup. The words tasted like ash in Tasek's mouth, but he knew they were true, and with a gesture that cost him more than any physical wound, he ordered his shattered fleet to retreat across the galaxy. The news spread faster than light itself, carried by hyperspace relays and whispered through diplomatic channels, and everywhere the message arrived, it carried the same stunning revelation: the humans had struck first in the Galactic Council chamber. High Counselor Vethener read the battle reports with all four of his eyes, and for the first time in his ancient memory, he felt something that might have been genuine surprise. Delegate Mornkai leaned back in his seat and allowed himself a small smile, for he had warned his colleagues not to underestimate the young species from Earth. And now they were all about to learn exactly how wrong they had been. They actually did it, Mornkai murmured. And in those 4 words echoed the beginning of a new era for the galaxy. The emergency session of the Galactic Council drew representatives from every corner of known space, and the chamber that had witnessed 10,000 years of diplomatic proceedings now hummed with an energy that bordered on panic high. Counselor Vethener called the assembly to order with 3 sharp strikes of his ceremonial staff, and the sound echoed through sudden silence as 200 delegations waited to hear what would be done about the human situation. We have all received the battle reports from the Veilous Nebula. Vethener began, his 4 eyes sweeping across the gathered representatives. And we must now determine how this council will respond to humanity's unprecedented actions. Ambassador Daniel Worth stood at the central podium once again. But this time, the aliens did not look at him with dismissal or amusement, and he could see fear in some of their eyes, along with something else that might have been grudging respect. Ambassador Worth, Vethener continued, explain to this council why humanity chose to launch an unprovoked attack against the Cathari Empire. Daniel remained calm despite the accusation hidden within that question, for he had expected this exact line of argument, unprovoked. Daniel repeated the words slowly. With respect, High Counselor, I stood in this very chamber 12 days ago and presented evidence of the Cathari fleet massing to invade human space. And this council chose to do nothing. Murmurs rippled through the assembly, for many delegates remembered that day and the casual dismissal that had followed. The council made no promise of protection. Vethener countered. Humanity holds observer status only, and you knew this when you petitioned for assistance. Daniel nodded, his expression revealing nothing of the cold anger burning in his chest. You are correct, Daniel agreed. And because we knew no help would come, we chose to help ourselves, which is precisely what any species would do when faced with extinction. Commander Zirith rose from the Valorian section, her armored form casting long shadows across the polished floor, and she held a data tablet that glowed with tactical analysis. I have studied the battle in detail, Zirith announced. her compound eyes fixed on Daniel with unsettling intensity. "And what I found disturbs me greatly." She activated the central display, and a holographic replay of the battle filled the chamber. Human ships did not simply attack, Zirith explained. They targeted supply lines first, then communications, then command vessels. In precisely that order, and their strike teams captured intelligence rather than simply destroying enemy assets. She paused, letting her words sink into the assembly. "This was not desperation," Zirith continued. "This was surgical precision, planned and executed with a level of tactical sophistication that no young species should possess." Daniel felt a flicker of pride at her analysis. Though he kept his expression neutral, "Humanity has faced many threats throughout our history," Daniel responded. "We learned long ago that survival requires more than courage. It requires intelligence and preparation. A delegate from the inner worlds, a crystalline being whose body chimed with each movement, rose to speak. The question before us is simple," the crystal being declared. "Are humans a threat to galactic stability? And if so, what should be done about them?" Several delegations voiced agreement, and Daniel recognized the danger building in the chamber. For fear often led to violent solutions. "If I may," a new voice interrupted, and all eyes turned to Delegate Mornkai as he stood from the Draven section. "Delegate Mornkai," Vethener acknowledged with visible reluctance. "You wish to speak." Mornkai moved to the floor with the slow dignity of his species. 3 of his 5 eyes fixed on the assembly, while 2 watched Daniel with something that might have been sympathy. "I have studied human history extensively," Mornkai began, "and I believe many in this chamber misunderstand what we witnessed at the Velas Nebula." He gestured, and new images appeared on the central display. Images drawn from human archives. "Humans evolved on a world they call Earth," Mornkai explained. "A planet of extreme environments, deadly predators, and constant competition for resources. And yet they not only survived, but thrived." The images showed humans facing challenges that made several delegates gasp with disbelief. Storms and predators and harsh landscapes that would have destroyed lesser species. Throughout their history, humans have demonstrated a pattern, Mornkai continued. When threatened, they do not wait for destruction to find them. They meet it head-on with everything they have. He turned to face the council directly. "What humanity did at the Velas Nebula was not aggression," Mornkai declared. "It was defense. The defense of a species that learned long ago that waiting for mercy is the same as waiting for death." Silence fell across the chamber as his words settled into the minds of 200 delegations. High Counselor Vethener finally spoke, his voice carrying less certainty than before. "Even so," Vethener said slowly, "we cannot simply ignore what has happened, for the implications are troubling regardless of motivation." Daniel stepped forward, knowing this was the moment that would determine humanity's future. "Then do not ignore it," Daniel said. "Send a delegation to Earth, see our worlds with your own eyes. Speak with our people and learn who we truly are." He spread his hands in a gesture of openness. "Humanity does not seek war with this council or anyone else," Daniel continued. "We seek only the right to exist, the right to protect our families and our homes, and if that makes us dangerous, then perhaps the galaxy needs a little danger." Commander Zirith studied him for a long moment before speaking. "I will lead the observation delegation personally," she announced. Surprising everyone, including herself, Vethener considered the offer, then nodded slowly. "Very well," the High Counselor declared. "A delegation will travel to human space and assess the situation directly, and until the report is complete, this council will take no action against humanity." It was not victory, but it was not defeat either. And Daniel accepted the compromise with a respectful bow far across the galaxy. Admiral Grace Holloway received the news in their command center, surrounded by officers who had not slept in days. They are sending observers, Lieutenant Sandra Cole reported. Commander Zereth will lead the delegation personally. Grace nodded slowly, her tired eyes reflecting the stars visible through the observation window. Good, she said. Let them see what we have built. Let them understand why we fight. But even as she spoke, her tactical displays showed something troubling. For deep in Cathari space, the defeated fleet was regrouping. And Warlord Thasek was not the kind of enemy who accepted defeat gracefully. The Cathari will return, Captain Nathan Cross said quietly. Voicing what everyone already knew, Grace turned to face her officers. And in her expression they saw the same determination that had carried humanity to the stars. Let them come, Grace replied. And when they do, we will teach them the same lesson we taught them before. That humanity does not kneel. Humanity does not surrender. Humanity fights. The stars outside seemed to pulse with agreement and across human space. A species that the galaxy had dismissed as primitive, prepared for whatever came next. 3 months passed like water through open fingers, and the galaxy slowly adjusted to the new reality that humanity had created with fire and determination. While the Council delegation toured human worlds and struggled to understand the species they had so thoroughly, underestimated Commander Zereth stood on the observation deck of the human vessel carrying her delegation, and she watched the blue-green world of New Cascadia grow larger in the viewport. A thriving colony of nearly 2 million souls who had built something beautiful in the darkness between stars. It is remarkable, Delegate Monkai said from beside her, his 5 eyes drinking in the sight. 40 years among the stars, and they have already established 17 colony worlds. Zereth nodded slowly, her compound eyes reflecting the light of the distant sun. They build quickly, and they build well, she acknowledged. I have seen their cities, their farms, their schools. And everywhere I look, I see a species that refuses to accept limitations. Their conversation was interrupted by an alarm that shrieked through the vessel, and both aliens felt the ship shudder as it changed course abruptly. What is happening? Zereth demanded. A warrior instincts immediately alert. The human captain appeared on the internal display, his face tight with controlled fear. Cathari fleet detected, the captain reported. Over 300 vessels? They bypassed our core systems entirely and struck directly at New Cascadia. Monkai felt his blood chill at those words, for he understood instantly what this meant. They target your civilians, he said, horror evident in his voice on the colony below. Chaos erupted as defense sirens wailed across cities that had never known war. And 2 million people looked up at the sky and saw death descending toward them. Governor Elena Marsh coordinated the evacuation from her command bunker, her voice steady despite the terror clawing at her heart. All citizens proceed to designated shelter zones, Elena announced over the emergency broadcast. Defense forces are mobilizing, stay calm, and help each other. The colony's small defense fleet, barely 30 vessels, launched to meet the invaders. Knowing they had no chance of victory, but determined to buy time for the people below, Warlord Thasek watched from his rebuilt flagship as his fleet approached the helpless colony, and satisfaction burned in his chest at the thought of revenge. They thought themselves clever. Thasek growled to his officers. They thought their surprise attack would break our spirit, but the Cathari do not break. We return stronger, and we crush those who dare to strike us. He pointed at the tiny human ships rising to meet him. Destroy them, Thasek commanded. And then we burn their world to ash, across the vast distance separating New Cascadia from Earth. Admiral Grace Holloway received the distress signal and felt her heart stop for one terrible moment. How long until our fleet can reach them? Grace demanded. Lieutenant Sandra Cole worked her console frantically, running calculations that brought only despair. 18 hours at maximum speed, Sandra reported, her voice cracking. The colony will fall in two. Grace slammed her fist against the console, and the pain in her hand was nothing compared to the anguish in her soul. There has to be another way, she said. I will not abandon 2 million people. Captain Nathan Cross stepped forward from the tactical station. His expression grave, but determined. Admiral, Nathan said carefully. There is one option, but the risks are extreme. Grace turned to face him, ready to grasp any hope, no matter how thin. The experimental jump drive, Nathan continued. It could cut our travel time to 4 hours, maybe less. But it has never been tested on a full fleet. Everyone in the command center understood what he was not saying. For the experimental technology could just as easily scatter their ships across unknown space or tear them apart entirely. What are the odds of success? Grace asked. Nathan hesitated before answering. Engineering estimates 40%, he admitted. Maybe less depending on fleet size. Silence hung over the command center as the weight of the decision pressed down on everyone present. Grace thought about the 2 million people on New Cascadia, the families and children and dreams that would be extinguished if she did nothing. And she thought about the crews of her fleet who would trust her with their lives. 40%. Grace repeated slowly. Against 0% if we do nothing. She turned to her communications officer. Signal all vessels, Grace ordered, her voice carrying absolute certainty. We are activating protocol long jump, full fleet implementation. And any captain who wishes to remain behind may do so without judgment. Not a single ship opted out aboard. The vessel carrying the council delegation. Commander Zirith listened to the human transmissions with growing disbelief. They are going to use untested technology to save their colony, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. They could lose their entire fleet. Mordecai nodded slowly, and in his eyes shone something that might have been admiration. That is what we failed to understand about them. Mordecai replied. They do not calculate the odds of survival. They calculate the cost of failure. The human captain approached them with a request that shocked both aliens. The admiral has extended an invitation, the captain said. Our vessel will be jumping with the fleet. You may transfer to a non-combat ship if you prefer. Zirith's compound eyes met the captain's gaze. And in that moment, she made a decision that would change everything. We stay, Zirith declared. I want to see this for myself. Throughout human space, engines roared to life as the fleet assembled for the most dangerous maneuver in their history, and aboard every ship, crews prepared for a journey that might lead to victory or oblivion. Admiral Holloway stood on the bridge of her command vessel, her eyes fixed on the countdown timer as it approached 0. All ships report ready, Lieutenant Cole announced. Grace nodded once, then opened a channel to the entire fleet. What we do today, we do for our people, Grace declared. We do not know if we will survive this jump, but we know that our families, our friends, our children are counting on us to try, and that is enough. She paused, letting her words settle into the hearts of every man and woman under her command. For Earth, Grace finished. For humanity, jump now. The fleet vanished in a flash of light that tore reality itself. And across the galaxy, everyone who witnessed the readings held their breath and waited to see if humanity would emerge on the other side. 4 hours. Grace had promised. 4 hours to save a world, 4 hours to prove that humanity would never abandon their own asterisk. The universe screamed as reality tore open above New Cascadia. And from that wound in space poured the human fleet, battered and disoriented, but alive. And their arrival sent shockwaves through every sensor system in the star. System Admiral Grace Holloway gripped her command chair as her vision cleared. And the first thing she saw was the Keth-Ari Armada, descending toward the colony below like a swarm of metal locusts. Status report, Grace demanded, her voice cutting through the chaos on the bridge. 87% of fleet survived the jump. Lieutenant Sandra Cole reported, wonder evident in her voice. Some vessels have damage, but all are combat capable. Grace allowed herself one moment of relief before the reality of their situation crashed back down. All ships. This is Admiral Holloway, Grace announced across the fleet channel. Form defensive perimeter around the colony. Nothing gets through to those people below. The human fleet moved with desperate speed, positioning themselves between the Cathari and the vulnerable world they had come to save on the surface of New Cascadia. Governor Elena Marsh watched the sensor readings and felt tears streaming down her face. They came, Elena whispered. They actually came, across the colony. 2 million people looked up at the sky and saw hope arriving in the form of human warships. And their fear transformed into something fierce and proud. Warlord Thasek stared at his tactical display in absolute disbelief. For the humans had done something that violated every law of physics he understood. Impossible, Thasek snarled. They could not have arrived so quickly. They could not. But the evidence burned before his eyes as human weapons began firing. And Thasek realized that this battle would not be the easy slaughter he had anticipated. All vessels engage, Thasek commanded. Destroy them all. The battle that followed would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for centuries to come. Human ships formed a living shield around New Cascadia, absorbing punishing fire, while their smaller strike vessels wove through the enemy formation with suicidal courage. And every time a Cathari vessel broke through the line, another human ship moved to intercept it. Captain Nathan Cross led his squadron directly into the heart of the enemy fleet, his vessel twisting through a maze of weapons fire that should have been impossible to survive. All units target their flagship, Nathan ordered. We cut off the head and the body dies. Aboard the vessel carrying Commander Zirith and Delegate Monkai. Both aliens watched the battle unfold with a mixture of horror and awe. They throw themselves against superior numbers without hesitation, Zirith observed, her tactical mind struggling to process what she witnessed. Their losses are significant, and yet they do not retreat. Monkai pointed to the colony below, where evacuation shuttles continue to rise despite the chaos above. They are buying time, Monkai explained. Every minute they hold is another minute for their people to reach safety. And for humans, that calculation is simple on the surface. Sergeant Cody Barnes led his Marines through the streets of the capital city, helping civilians reach the shelter bunkers while Cathari dropships attempted to land ground forces. Keep moving, Cody shouted to a group of terrified families. The shelters are just ahead. You are going to make it. A Cathari warrior emerged from a crashed dropship, and Cody met the alien with the fury of a man protecting his own. The fight was brief and brutal, and when it ended, Cody stood over the fallen enemy and helped the families continue their escape. Marines hold this street, Cody ordered his squad. Nothing gets past us in orbit. Admiral Holloway watched her fleet being slowly torn apart and knew that they could not sustain this battle much longer. Admiral, Lieutenant Cole reported grimly. We have lost 32 vessels. Another 40 report critical damage. Grace nodded, her jaw set with determination that bordered on madness. Then we make every ship count, Grace replied. Signal Captain Cross. Execute the final option. Nathan received the order and understood immediately what it meant. All strike teams, Nathan announced. We are going for the flagship directly. This ends now. His squadron turned toward the crushing tide, where Warlord Thasek commanded his fleet, and they flew into a wall of defensive fire that lit the void like a second-some lieutenant. Maya Torres worked her communications console aboard the Vigilant, broadcasting a message that reached every vessel in the system. Cathari fleet, Maya announced. This is humanity speaking. Surrender now or witness your warlord fall. Thasek heard the message and laughed. But his laughter died when the first human vessel punched through his defensive screen and began firing directly at his. Flagship Nathan Cross led the assault personally, his ship taking damage that should have destroyed it twice over. But the human vessel kept coming, kept fighting, kept refusing to die. "All weapons target the bridge," Nathan ordered. And his crew obeyed with grim satisfaction. The crushing tide shuddered under the assault, and Thasek felt his world crumbling around him as human marines breached his hull and fought their way toward the command deck. Sergeant Barnes led the boarding team, his marines cutting through Kethari defenders with the efficiency of people who had nothing left to lose. "Warlord Thasek," Cody announced as he burst onto the bridge. "By order of the human fleet, you are now a prisoner of war." Thasek looked at the humans standing before him, small and fragile compared to Kethari warriors, and yet somehow more terrifying than anything he had ever faced. "Kill me," Thasek demanded. "Grant me the warrior's death." Cody shook his head slowly. "Humans do not grant mercy to those who target civilians," Cody replied. "But we also do not slaughter the defeated. You will stand before the Galactic Council and answer for what you have done." With their warlord captured and their fleet in chaos, the Kethari broke and fled, and across New Cascadia, 2,000,000 voices rose in celebration in the Galactic Council chamber. High Counselor Vethana received Commander Zirith's report and read it in absolute silence. "Humans are not conquerors," the report concluded. "They are protectors, and they will sacrifice everything to defend their own. They strike first not from aggression, but from love. And any species that threatens them should understand this. They will never stop fighting. They will never surrender. And they will never abandon their people." Vethner set down the report and looked at the assembled council. "I move that humanity be granted full membership," Vethner declared. And for the first time in his ancient memory, his voice carried something that might have been respect. The vote was unanimous. Ambassador Daniel Worth accepted the offer with quiet dignity. But before he stepped away from the podium, he offered one final thought. "We thank the Council for this recognition," Daniel said, "but let me be clear about something. We did not fight for your approval, and we did not seek your permission. We fought because our people were in danger. And that will always be enough, friend or foe. Humanity protects its own, far across the galaxy." Admiral Grace Holloway stood among the survivors of her fleet and looked out at the stars that humanity had claimed as their own. They had proven something today, something that the galaxy would never forget. Humanity strikes first because humanity loves fiercest, and that love would carry them to whatever challenges awaited among the infinite stars. The galaxy had learned its lesson, and humanity was just getting started. Asterisk.